We started talking and it was quite intense, I would say. Realms of affection, so I was beautiful. Drive safely, take care, let me know when you get there. These are all things that I wasn't used to, so again, pulling me in. I'd not heard from him for a few days, and he just said, I've been in an accident. I want you to transfer £6,500 to pay my hospital bill. So by that point, you become numb to it almost. You know it's happening. 5 grand, 6 grand, 8 grand, 10 grand. It just broke me down as a person.
In romance fraud, it's very easy to keep people in the bubble because you have that emotional tie and you don't want to break that. Now, silence is something that's really important to criminals in romance fraud, and it's one of the key mechanisms that they get to psychologically and emotionally control their victims. Now, you can see it's a short leap between here and domestic abuse, where the victim feels like, I've done something wrong, I need to do something to make it better.
So my sister, she'd actually got a picture of him through my phone, and she sent herself that picture, and she never told me. She did speak to me just before it all kind of went bang. She said, you sound awful, Kirsty. I said, oh, no, I'm just a bit run down and I'm okay. And she said, well, should I come over? And I went, oh, no, no, no. I've never done that to my sister before. And that was it. When she put the phone down, she started to search all social media platforms with that picture that she'd got, because nobody could get through to me.
It's really important not to play into the hands of the fraudsters, who are going to be saying things like, your family's jealous of you, they don't want you to be happy, they just don't have what you want, or they're painting to me to be a criminal, but I'm not. So we have to try and be really gentle, really supportive, and you can also bring other cases in and say, well, I've read something on the news, could this be something similar to that? And go on that journey of discovery together. It might not work straight away, so you have to be patient as well. You might have to allow them to continue with that fraud until they're ready to come back to you. Much like in domestic abuse, if you push too hard, you might push them away from you.
Christmas is around the corner. I went to go pick Rachel up from my mum's, and this was the first time that I'd actually seen my mum and dad in a very, very long time. I got in the car and Rachel said, Kirsty, I've got something to tell you. I found the man that you've been talking to. And I says, how do you know I've been talking to someone? She says, well, you told me in the summer. And I says, well, what do you mean you found him? I know where he is. And I got very irate. She says, look, you need to calm down because you're driving. I've got the kids. You go home and I want you to sit down. I want you to look through what I send you. And I don't need to do that, Rachel, because I know where he is.
Most of these frauds are online. Some are in person, but most are online, and more online are happening. So scripting is a really important way to manipulate individuals. They will do things that sound romantic, but are actually completely controlling. And what these criminals do in romance frauds in particular is something I call the set up and drip feed technique. And this is where they plant information early on in the relationship and then refer back to it, which will make it will make sense given they're a multimillionaire, but they don't have any cash at the moment.
And I got home and I sat there and all the lights were off and the tree was on. And I looked at the message that she sent with the links. I clicked on the first link and it took me to a social media page. There was his face. And I was like, oh my God. I couldn't stop until I found all the pictures that he sent me, because still my mind, even though I could see him right there in front of me, that it can't possibly be him. So I saw that one picture of him in the hospital. I knew at that moment I'd lost everything.
Across our platforms, we are removing over 50 inauthentic accounts every minute, 87% of which are removed proactively, so before a user can report them. It happens all the time on social media, or even a wrong number text. You're looking for connection, and from there, that turns into a longer conversation, which turns into trust building over time.
You still have your traditional kind of people doing swindles and scams to your face and knocking on your door dressed as, say, a postman. There's a real short-form version of this where someone will use online dating or an online platform or even like a physical relationship, and when you've met someone in person, right, to introduce, okay, they might have built a legend around themselves that they're a good like investor or a hedge fund manager, that kind of legend that they build around them. What I see through countless interactions with victims or other law enforcement organisations around the world, the common denominator, how could that happen to me? That is how a lot of romance fraudsters work. They set up a false persona on social media to befriend you. The language will differ, but it's that kind of first contact, and they will build their credibility up, and then they'll cash out, they'll disappear, they'll take everything from somebody.
Rachel tried to ring, and she just kept ringing, and I just couldn't answer the phone. The emotion that I felt was just, I've never felt anything like it. It's fear, it's love, hatred, it's everything all rolled into one. Even if I'd have screamed, I don't think anything would have come out. I walked into my parents' house and they were like, "Oh God, it's so wonderful to see you. You don't look very well, darling. Are you all right?" And I said, "No, I'm not okay. I've got something I need to tell you about." The person I was most frightened to tell him was my dad, actually, still at 43. My mum was just shocked. How could you fallen for such a thing? And, you know, that sort of thing. And then my dad just turned to me and he just said, "Doesn't matter. We'll move forward together." And I went home that night and decided, did I have enough energy left to go to the police and tell them? I woke up in the morning and I walked into the police station and I just said to the girl behind the desk, I just said, "I need to speak to somebody about a crime." And she said, "We're really busy, it's Christmas." And she handed me a piece of paper. And I said, "I don't think I can really write this down. I need to speak to somebody." And she said, "Well, what is it?" And I said, "I've been a victim of a romance fraud." She's taking notes and I started talking. And after about 15 minutes or so, 20 minutes, she put the book on the table and she just looked at me and she said, "Kirsty, can I stop you there?" And I said, "This is just a bit too much for me. This is bigger than I am. And I need to go upstairs and find somebody else because this is something that needs to be dealt with professionally and properly." Yeah, I was in the police station for about six to 7 hours.
So important to get members of the public who have been a victim of any type of fraud to report it. One of the most awful things about fraud is that the victims feel like it's their fault.
So there's a whole host of reasons why the reporting is so low. So the shame that victims feel is immense.
The victim is manipulated into believing that something is real when it's not. So then they turn that back on themselves and say, "How could I not see it?" But it's designed for you not to see it. There are particular vulnerabilities that are exploited by these criminals. And they're vulnerabilities that all of us have at one time or another. So it's not your standard vulnerabilities such as old age, for example, or disability, or youth. So these are all particular vulnerabilities. However, everyone is situationally vulnerable at some point or contextually vulnerable.
And I'd not heard from him for ages and ages and ages. And he rang me and he said that he loved me and all the rest of it. I just said, "What are you ringing me for? Why are you ringing me?" "Because I've been in an accident." That's when the final nail was in the coffin, that I realised that I'd been hooked in completely and just taken for granted completely.
In England alone, if we round up, we've got 10,000 reports a year. But we need to understand that that's only about 10% of the actual crime. So we've got to round that up and you're looking at 100,000 crimes a year of just romance fraud. Gender-wise, this isn't a gendered crime. It is around 50% women, 50% men, but women tend to be the ones that come forward to share their stories. So society gets a very much skewed view of who victims are in romance fraud, but anyone can be a victim.
I don't believe I've had justice. I don't think they'll ever find them. I will not get my money back.
The victim gets their money back when it's a certain type of fraud. There was a voluntary code which many banks used previously, but it was voluntary, so there was an inconsistent experience for victims and not a sharing of costs or liabilities. So what's come out the other side of that voluntary scheme is a mandatory scheme where financial sector institutions, so banks, payment institutions in particular, have equal liability So the sender and the receiver, for the loss to the victim, public sector, private sector, policy, law enforcement, we all want to stop scams. It's really important we put victims at the heart of all of the decisions we make around this because of the harm, right? The harm to someone can be catastrophic.
Really, really hard. It doesn't just destroy you as a person and make you think that you're completely ridiculous, and that it affects the way that you act around people. It affects me answering the phone. It affects my sending of emails. It affects my banking. It's affected how I feel when I go out into public. And I can laugh now and I can smile, but it's taken a long time to get there.
I think the legislation's actually there already. It's just having the resources to deal with it. It's that police understand how to use that legislation. When we're educated about something, it's easier for us to grab hold of that, learn from it, and pass our new learning on to other people.
It's not just that someone is left often in financial ruin, but they're heartbroken as well. And they have to really deal with that grief. And that's what makes these scams so phenomenally cruel.
I'm sharing my story because if it stops one person going through what I've had to go through and feeling feelings that I never even knew I could feel about myself, then it's worth me laying myself bare for others.
It's never your fault that it's happened in the first place. It happens to everybody. Imagine the trauma, like a tangled web of fine gold chains. And we know when we've got tangled jewellery that as we start to unpeel and loosen one of the knots, another one might get tight, and another trigger that comes along might pull again on something else. But slowly, as we start to relax and we start to work through the trauma, those knots and those tangles start to release. The reason that it's happened to you is because you're kind, you're empathetic, you're respectful, you're generous. That's really amazing qualities to have, so don't blame yourself about it.
Cyber threats are going to be there, and they're going to be there to the financial industry. What is important is to be smarter than them.
Sometimes you get redirected to something crazy, like I have no idea what website I'm on anymore. Sometimes they go out of their way to make it look like you're in the right place.
What can happen next is actually you subscribe to some kind of service. And this is called subscription scam.
That's a small mum and pop shop with an online presence. That's absolutely where they're focused too. So we need to make sure the whole ecosystem is safe.